this thing on. I got a stand for the phones to record when we go abroad because we didn't get to do it this time. The equipment didn't arrive on time for Guatemala, so we were able to record.
This works just fine, and I can directly.
Okay,
do
so
the video.
next week, what I want you to do, I'm going to give you guys a week kind of to review. So from chapter 1, what I would ask you to do this week to next week is from chapter 1 through chapter 7 to review all that stuff. So your vocab, all your grammar, everything. Okay? And then what we'll do is I'll pick a text and we'll apply basically everything we've learned.
You gonna sit here?
all
Yeah, I was
along
gonna
the
say.
way.
Oh, it's not even
No,
in the
no.
comfy chair.
No, I pulled that out for me so I
Okay.
could look at the computer.
But this week we're going to talk about adverbs. Adjectives. We're going to talk about verbs that take direct objects in different cases and different uses of the article. I think that was the bulk of the chapter, right? Those 4 things. You can leave it open.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. So, how are adverbs used? Edgar? Don't do it. Close the book, Baba. Let's close it up.
Adverbs are going to modify.
Close the book.
Adverbs are going to modify a verb. They're
Good.
going to describe a little bit more about the verb.
So time, place, that kind of stuff, right? And what else do they modify besides verbs?
So, in the workbook, I said that they modify also other adverbs
Yeah.
and adjectives, but I don't know if they modify adjectives.
No, they don't modify adjectives. I mean, there's probably some weird instance in the New Testament where that happens, because of but generally no. They modify verbs and adverbs. All right. So in the New Test, so there are other uses of the adjective. Of the adverb, but basically that's what you're going to learn this chapter. Okay, so pretty simple. The best way to kind of get a handle on the use of adjectives is to when you're doing your vocabulary work, remember what the adjectives are. You know, so that when you see them, you're like, oh, that's an adjective. All right. So now next, what we're going to talk about, adverb. I get mixed up there. Next, we're going to look at the adjective. Yeah.
On memorize, is the same set of words you can still use for this.
Yeah, the vocabulary in Memorize, although I didn't break it up by chapters, because at that point I didn't know how to do
Fine.
that.
But we could just run with all of
yeah,
it.
it's the vocabulary for this entire book.
Okay.
All of it is on there.
Oh, wowzers.
Yeah. What?
Dang. I didn't know that.
Yeah, all of it is in there. And with time, you know, I'll separate it, make it chapter by chapter. It's just time. I just don't have the time to do it that way. So, all the vocab is in there. Now, adjectives. And these are really fun because, at least in this chapter, he gave us 4 uses for the adjective. Edgar, do you remember what they are?
There's substantival, attributive.
So let's go. Just tell me one. So the substantival use. What is the substantival use of the adjective?
That's going to replace the noun.
It's
So
going
like
to be
the good, the
functioning
bad,
as a
the
substantive. Good, the bad, the good. Good. Then you give me one. Give me a use.
Attributive.
Attributive adjective. What's an attributive adjective?
It's an adjective that modifies a noun.
That attributes
Something, the noun.
to
a what is it? Substantive.
a substantive. Good. Why is the broader category substantive helpful? It's true. They do nouns, but why is the broader category substantive useful to remember to use that?
Because, like he talks about in the chapter, you can have substantives are other forms of grammar that function as nouns.
And
So-
usually in Greek, this is kind of jumping ahead. How is that indicated?
By the article.
By an article. An article can substantivize other things besides noun. So even grammatical forms, prepositional phrases, things like that. Okay. So 2 uses. Substantival use, attributive use. Edgar, can you think of another use?
The one where you have to use helping verbs.
The one where you have to use helping verbs.
I think I'm confused.
So there's the substantive use. There's the attributive use. There is the predicate adjective.
Yes.
Right, predicate adjective. And now, what is a predicate adjective?
The predicate. I'm trying to remember. I guess it is when you're using. Well, obviously it's
If you think about a sentence, right? If you think about a sentence, and we just wanted to break up the sentence into two broad categories, Tyler, what would be the two categories that we're breaking the sentence up into?
The subject and the predicate.
The subject and the predicate. Right? So, Edgar, do you know what the predicate portion of a sentence does?
is elaborating on the subject.
It's predicating.
Mm-hmm.
It's predicating something about the subject, right? In the instance where you have a predicate adjective, the adjective is predicating, it's saying something about the subject. It's kind of weird because in a sense it's still functioning like an adjective would function, right? Which is attributing, but there's something different. What is the difference? There is a grammatical component that makes it different. And what is that grammatical component?
The verb. It's
the
the
verb of
aiming.
being.
Yeah.
Yeah, the verb of being,
like
whether
aiming.
which can be stated or implied. So it could be right in the text, aiming, or it's not in the text, right?
But it's implied in the
And it
context.
would be implied in the text. So it's
Actually-
when you have that kind of relationship. You have a copulative verb or a verb of being, and one of the nominatives that is used is a adjective. That's our
Three.
Three uses.
We didn't.
now the fourth use. What's the fourth use? And he gives it right at the beginning. He says it's the easiest use,
That's the adverbial use.
adverbial use. So an adjective can also be used as an adverb, and he gives some examples there. Okay, so then how do I identify an adverbial adjective? So what you have to remember is the position or the place of the adjective in relationship to the adverb or the verb that it's modifying. It's going to be, is it going to come, so if I'm reading the sentence, or from where you're sitting, if I'm reading the sentence, and here's my verb, is it going to come before or after the verb, generally speaking?
The adverb before.
Generally speaking, is going to come before, and at times it can be in the prominent position, which is at the beginning of the sentence. Right, over here. And really, that's it. It cannot have a article. Most of the time, it does have an article, but other than that, it's context. It's going to have you determine how the particular word is functioning, kind of like the conjunction ke, right? Context is going to tell you whether it's an and, an also,
or even.
an even, namely, context. So context. Then we have the predicate. Let's go with the predicate. No, so adjectival use, right?
Substantive.
We knock that out. The substantival use. How do you know if the adjective is functioning as a substantive?
Because you don't have. You're missing the subject. So
You're missing a substantive, right?
Mhm, yeah.
Substantive is not there anywhere. So the adjective is going to be functioning in the place, right? So it's going to have a particular kind of relationship to the verb, and that's going to indicate that for you. Next, the adjectival use, the substantival use, and how about the let's go with the predicate use of the adjective. Let me just take a look real quick to see something here.
Is it predicative or is it predicative?
Predicate.
Because he put it in like that, and I was like, I don't know how to pronounce that.
Because he's an Armenian. He's got, sometimes he just goes berserk. So he makes this point, and when Edgar brought this up, when you have the predicate, so there are two things that happen with the predicate use of the adjective. All right, there may be a need to supply what he calls a generic noun. Right, so the good man, the good woman, the good whatever. Generally, the case of the adjective itself and the context are going to determine what you need to supply. The second is when you have a neuter adjective. That usually means that what you're going to have is an abstract noun. So the good things, the bad things, the things, right? That kind of idea, thing or things. It can be plural or singular.
When the adjective is neuter, or when the article is neuter?
When the adjective is neuter. When you have a predicate adjective and it's neuter, it can indicate things. Now, when you have an adjective, this is one of the uses of the adjective. When you have a plural neuter adjective, that it's substantivizing or making some grammatical feature of the language a substantive, then that is going to make that a thing or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But here we're talking specifically about the adjectives. So you have those two situations with the predicate adjective, and it's kind of helpful to know that, so that when you're translating, you've got those two things in mind. So you're translating, like in your assignments that we're going to go over. So you're working through your assignments, and you see, okay, I have a adjective here in the predicate position, which we're going to talk about next. In the predicate position, and it's a feminine adjective, and I have enough of the context to determine that this is referring to Mary or to a woman. Or I have a neuter or a masculine, and so on and so forth, whatever. Okay, so what are the predicate positions? What is the first predicate position?
First
I
predicate
saw it in the book,
position.
and I was like, oh man, they added 2 more.
Yeah, don't worry about those extras, because those are going to be context with those, really. So you have 2 predicate positions. What's the first one?
Isn't the first one you have the article and the modifier? The
No,
adjective?
this is predicate position.
Oh yeah. Now I know what you're talking about.
Predicate positions are
Sorry.
different from attributive positions.
Yeah.
So what's the first predicate position?
The first predicate position is adjective, article, noun.
Adjective, article, noun. The second predicate position?
Is article, noun, adjective.
Article, noun, adjective. In the predicate positions, the noun is going to have the article. Why would that be important? Because the article would be indicating, in that kind of setup, what the subject is.
Mm-hmm.
And the adjective is attributing something to the subject, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the subject is going to in that grammatical situation, the subject is going to have the article. All right. So then, the attributive adjective, and then he talks about the degrees, right? How many degrees are there for the attributive adjective? Talks about the different degrees.
Degrees? Can you provide a definition?
Yeah.
Is that when it was talking
It's
about?
the different degrees. I forget what's the it's the comparative, the superlative, and
I know what you're talking about. And the What is it? It's like the normal, whatever.
Yeah, the normal one. But there's a name. It's not just called the normal one.
Yeah.
Let's see, where does he put that?
That's a Tyler definition.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
The normal.
The lame definition.
In layman's terms.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Let me find it. It's going to take me a second.
Right at the bottom.
Attributed position.
It's at the bottom right.
Yeah, somewhere. In here. Is it over here? No.
That's all I remember is the bottom right. I should go find it.
Oh, here it is. Yeah, it's comparative, superlative, positive. Positive, comparative, superlative. And it's helpful to know this. These categories now. Later on, we'll learn the comparative and the superlative. But basically, the positive is the regular attributive use, so the yellow car, right? The comparative would be comparing one or two things. So this is fuller. This bottle is fuller than this cup, something like that, right? And then you would have the superlative use. This is the fullest cup of all the cups, something like that. Okay, so those are the three uses of the attributive adjective. Now, what are the positions? The attributive position. So what is the first attributive position? In the first attributive position,
Oh no.
There's one article, and the adjective comes first.
It's article, adjective, noun, right?
Yeah. So there's one in the first attributive position. There's one article, and the adjective comes first, right?
Like before the noun.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the second attributive position,
Like
there are two articles, and the adjective comes second. Right?
Mhm.
In the third attributive position, you just start to get confused. Right? You just start to get confused. And then the fourth attributive position.
I like the fourth one. I get that one. It's just noun and adjective.
Yeah, but then that's context, and you can right? That would be context there, because in that situation you could actually have a
I
predicate
guess.
position.
Yeah.
So context is going to help you determine the fourth attributive position. So don't beat yourself up too much over that one. What's the third attributive position?
Is it
Substantive, article, adjective.
Yeah.
That's the third. Substantive, article, adjective.
He says it's rare.
Yeah, it is. It is. But it's still a possibility. The ones that you need to be most familiar with, at least at this point, right, is the first and second. Because those are going to be the most prominent ones that you're going to see. Alright, so the different uses, common uses of the article. So it can substantivize. It can substantivize adjectives, prepositional phrases, genitive modifiers, adverbs, and other constituents, statements, or even sentences. So you have to pay attention to articles, and he gives several examples. Several examples of this. There is also what he calls the anaphoric use, and what would be the anaphoric use of the adjective? Dun, dun, dun.
Of the article?
Yeah, of the article.
That, I think, is when you have the article matching the gender in case of something previously referred to, and so it becomes like that or something. It's just referring
this or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So he gives the example of John 1:4, en avto zoe ein ke e zoe ein to phos ton anthropon, right? In him was life, and this life, what life? The life that was in him. So that's an anaphoric use. It refers, it goes with a noun or something. It goes with something, but let's just say a substantive. It goes with a substantive, and it's used to point you back to a previous use of that same substantive in the context to help you understand that this is what is being referred to. It's an anaphoric, which means before. Okay? The implied family relative. This is a strange use. So basically, he gives some examples here. Matthew 6. I would tell you to be familiar with this, but this is not something that you need to know per se. The pronominal use. I think this is really helpful. How is the so he talks about the pronominal use, and there's two different ways that the pronominal is let me explain. What does pronominal mean? Pronoun. The word pronoun is in there, right?
Before?
So it's a
With?
use of the adjective. I keep saying that. Of the article, like a pronoun. But he makes a distinction that is helpful, where you have the alternative subject in a narrative, where the author is switching back and forth between subjects in a narrative. And what he does to indicate that there's this back and forth going on is that whoever the subject is receives the article. When the subject is switched, that new subject receives the article, and the previous subject does not have the article. So there's the switch. And then you have what he calls the relative pronoun-like use, which he translates as that is. Right? So you'll have an article, and it'll be referring back to a substantive in the context. And one of the best ways, I think it's a helpful way, that is, whoever. That is he, or that is whatever, she, or that is it. I think that's a helpful one. So then you have non-routine uses of the direct object. So a kuo can take direct objects in two cases. What are they?
Genitive, that one,
Yeah.
and the dative?
Yep, genitive and dative. And so that's a kuo, and then pistevo can take direct objects in the dative case. Okay. And that is the whole chapter. Right?
Those attributive ones are pretty hardcore, man.
Huh?
Those attributive ones are pretty.
If you just got to get used to them being used. I have to use the bathroom, so you pause that.
Yeah.